Thanks, everyone. Please have a seat. Kip, thank you very, very much. Thanks for the introduction, but mostly thank you for what you're doing for our province. You're kind of helping putting this province on a map that we weren't on before, and we need more entrepreneurs like you. We're getting more and more all the time, but thanks very much for that introduction. Thanks, Joan, for agreeing to MC tonight. We have a great team that's put this together. It's important for me to acknowledge Blair Ross and the dinner committee. They've sold a lot of tickets, witness this room, and it's hard work. So I thank them. I also want to thank Patrick at the party office, our party president, and our organization for making this possible. Thanks to the Dead South for being here. They are great. We're going to hear a bit more from them a little bit later on. And who knew that Jace from Duck Dynasty played the mandolin in the band from Saskatchewan? And that's pretty cool. So the spring session of the legislature is in the books. Lots of stuff actually got done. I think over 50 pieces of legislation were passed. A number of different elements in our growth plan were implemented. We funded some more training seats. There's a home care pilot for seniors that were a part of the spring session. We modernized labor laws again in Bill 85 to ensure that we're as competitive as we possibly can be. We reduced some royalties, and more on that in a bit. We changed about 70 liquor regulations in the province. Some of them have been around for Some of them have been around for a long time. In the old Saskatchewan, if you were golfing and you wanted to have a beverage from the beverage cart, the government trusted you to purchase the beverage, the government trusted you to drink the beverage, but the government did not trust you to open the beverage. The person driving the cart had to do that. We took a leap of faith in all of you. And we just said, look, I think those folks can also open the beverage. And we'll find out this summer if there are any resultant incidents from this particular bold decision that we've made. We also now have, or will have, the very first freestanding private sector liquor stores in Regina and Saskatoon. And during the session, we had visitors. We always do. That's always a highlight of the session, especially when the school kids come. I had a group come from Swift Current. Actually, it was the session before, but they always provide the best stories. This was a group of grade 4s, and there was a little grade 4 girl in this particular group whose parents are friends of ours, and we found out after that when she got home from her trip to Regina, her mom said, "How did it go?" And she said, "It was awesome." We went to the RCMP Center, we went to the Science Center, and then we got to see where Brad Wall works, at the Leisure Center. Maybe for some of us. So about a month ago, I'm not sure if you've heard this, there was a rural municipality in our next neighboring province of Manitoba that passed a unanimous resolution of that rural municipality that they should secede from Manitoba and join the province of Saskatchewan. It's the RM of Glenwood, in case you're wondering. Now, joining Saskatchewan, I think, would have some advantages for people in Manitoba. The PST would drop 3 points immediately. Income taxes would be a little bit lower. You could still cheer for the Jets, but you wouldn't have to cheer for the Bombers. And actually, this movement's kind of been picking up some momentum because some other RMs are considering a similar resolution. We've actually had requests for flags. We don't really know what to do with those. I received an email from a gentleman by the name of Don Gade. He's from Durban, Manitoba. He had heard me comment about this in the media and was trying to offer some solution for the fact that the RM of Glenwood is not actually adjacent to the province, so we'd actually have to drive through Manitoba to get to another part of Saskatchewan. And he said that he thought Highway 83 in, quote, what is now Manitoba, would be an approximate new border for the reconfigured province. I wrote him back, and I'll read you a quote from the letter that I sent him. I said to him, quote, "We have no plans to make our map more difficult to draw. We already have our hands full with spelling and pronunciation." What I didn't put in the letter, though, was that we have, after this winter, I think all of us have been thinking that maybe it would be good if Saskatchewan could annex some property to the south and to the east. We weren't, though, thinking of the arm of Glenwood as much as the Turks and Caicos, I think, for most of us. It's been a long winter. Ladies and gentlemen, if those Manitobans were, for some reason, to join your Saskatchewan, they would add their number to 1,089,907 souls living today in your province. We're on our way to 1.1 million. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when, notwithstanding the fact that many said it was a statistical impossibility for us ever to get to 1.1 million. Our growth plan, as you know, highlights the fact that we think we can get to 1.2 million people by 2020. Last year alone, 21,690 people moved to Saskatchewan. When population numbers like that come out, we generally put out a press release. And we did. We didn't take credit for the population numbers, but we put out a press release. The headline of that particular press release was, "Saskatchewan keeps growing." And we just highlighted that number, 21,690. But we did a little bit of research. We looked back 10 years before, and we found a similar news release. And I'm not going to be very partisan tonight. I'm just not. But it was, but it was issued by the government of the day. It was an NDP government, and it was just after population numbers had come out in 2003. And that particular news release was issued with this following headline, and I quote, "Outmigration at lowest level in 4 years." And the minister was quoted in the press release. And the minister was an NDP, and it was quoted in the news release. It said, and I'm not making this up, it said that this fact was actually economic momentum for Saskatchewan. The fact that we were losing people still, young people, people like Kip, the fact that we were losing them, but we were losing them at a slower pace, was economic momentum. What a change that all of you have wrought in this province. Because in the new Saskatchewan, when something is falling, we don't call it momentum, we call it gravity. And we try to do something about it, as you have all been doing for the last number of years. And there is other good news almost every day that's coming forward. Again, not because of the government, but because of all of you. Saskatchewan has the lowest unemployment rate in Canada. Regina has the lowest unemployment rate of any major city in Canada. Yesterday, StatsCan announced that Saskatchewan has the fastest growing wages in the country. Wages are growing at 5.5% year over year. That's compared to the national average of 3.1%. Our average weekly wages are now higher than British Columbia, higher than Ontario, and we've got Alberta in our sights. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a big deal. Here in this room tonight are representatives of 278 businesses that have supported this particular event with their presence. We've done the quick math. We think literally tens of thousands of employees are represented by those 278 businesses, billions of dollars of investment, and you're also ensuring that your employees are earning more so that you can keep those employees and attract more, and we deserve to give you a round of applause for precisely that point. The number of people applying for employment insurance is dropping faster in Saskatchewan than anywhere else in the country. We've seen record investment, $20 billion last year, $20 billion forecast for this year, and a few weeks ago we confirmed that Saskatchewan is now, and this is pretty big, Saskatchewan is now the fourth biggest exporter among all the provinces, $32.5 billion in 2012. We've now moved ahead of British Columbia. And they're
and they're beside the ocean. They have ports in British Columbia. In fact, think about British Columbia right now. British Columbia has a longer golfing season. British Columbia has mountains. British Columbia has ports. We're beating them in exports. We're beating them in world champion snowboarders, thanks to Mick Morris. And we're beating them in PGA Tour professionals, thanks to Graham Dillette. So that's pretty good. I don't really follow golf. Graham's 2 under today after the first round of the Memorial, and tied for 13. But BC, ladies and gentlemen, they are getting the big things right, because not very long ago they made a choice. They chose to continue to move forward. They chose, frankly, in my view, fiscal responsibility and economic development ahead of some other things. And that's good for us. It's good for the New West partnership that is formed by Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia, and we look forward to working with Premier Clark in the future. They chose to keep things going. What about us? How do we keep things moving forward in the province? Or at least, how do we make sure that our government doesn't get in the way of the things that all of you are doing? To answer those questions, we released the growth plan last fall. It had 6 points, 6 components. The first component of the government's growth plan is infrastructure. There was an infrastructure deficit when we were elected, and there is compounding infrastructure issues because the economy is growing. And so we've got a plan, and we've proposed innovation and P3s and Sask builds to try to deal with that, and it's there in the growth plan. Number 2, the second component of our plan for growth is a plan to deal with the labor shortage in Saskatchewan. We know we'll need about 60,000 more workers before 2020. We know that the labor shortage is here today, and so we've combined some initiatives to try to encourage greater First Nations and Métis involvement in the economy with more apprenticeship spaces and more training seats, with more aggressive immigration numbers. And a very important development happened on that front just last week, when the federal government announced new immigrant nominee numbers for the country. Remember, our growth plan had asked for 2,000 just for the province. Well, the federal government looked at the situation. They've approved 2,000 for the whole country. For the whole country. But I'm not sure if you read this last week. The province of Saskatchewan is going to get 450 of those 2,000. That's a 27%, and that is a good first step for the province to get to 2,000. And I think it's a significant recognition on the part of the national government, on the part of the country, that this economy is providing leadership for the rest of the country. And if we say we need those nominees and those newcomers and we want them, then we ought to receive more than our population perhaps would indicate. The third part of our plan is innovation. We think we do need to diversify the economy away from a dependence on natural resources, but that diversification should happen on the strength of those resources. And so we should be investing in agricultural research, in a new global food security institute, in new crop science. It means we should invest in innovation around uranium at the new Dr. Sylvia Fedoruk Nuclear Innovation Center at U of S. It means we should lead in hydrocarbon research and innovation at the Petroleum Research Center at the University of Regina and at BD3, Boundary Dam 3, where today, near completion, is the world's largest clean coal demonstration project, on time, on budget, and working to ensure that for those countries, and there's a lot of them, for whom coal has got to be a part of the mix, that Saskatchewan can provide the technology. I think it was just last week I was at the conference. We had over 112 delegates from 15 countries who were here expressly for the purpose of finding out a little bit more about that $1.2 billion project that we're leading on in southeast Saskatchewan. Innovation is a big part of our growth agenda. The fourth element of the growth plan is engagement. And that very simply is just this. We need to tell our story. We need to tell your story. Here's a role actually for government. Government's not very good at picking winners and losers in the economy. It's only about 50% right. But it has a role to play, and one of those roles is telling your story. getting to those countries around the world that need the things that Saskatchewan has. It means more trade missions that we've engaged on for 5 years. It means supporting the Saskatchewan Trade Export Partnership with more dollars, and we've been able to do that. Last fall, we did a trade mission to China and Singapore and Indonesia. Indonesia is a country of 242 million people who, according to the embassy there, have never received a visit from a First Minister from Canada. 242 million people, their economy is growing, their GDP is growing about 7% a year, and ladies and gentlemen, 40% of all of their imports from Canada come from the province of Saskatchewan. So we thought we should go there and say, oh, I don't know, thank you. And we've got more stuff as well that you could maybe buy. And we're going to do more of that. This engagement piece of our growth plan also means that we would speak out on issues like the Keystone Pipeline. There won't be any Saskatchewan oil in that pipeline. But notwithstanding the fact that there won't be Saskatchewan oil in that pipeline, it does come through the province. It has a direct impact in the southwest. It deals with pipeline capacity issues to an extent in the Bakken. That's good for us. And it gives Canadian suppliers of energy a chance to close the differential because it gets our oil to Tidewater. Right now, that differential, that discount costs you, the owners of oil in the province of Saskatchewan, between 13% and 19%, about $300 million annually to the Treasury and $2.5 billion to industry that they would probably reinvest, certainly in part, in the province of Saskatchewan. We do have a stake. And here's another important factor. We want to get involved because the Keystone issue goes to that Canada-US relationship, goes to the brand of Canadian energy, and oh, by the way, it's important to the province of Alberta, and what's good for the province of Alberta is, for the most part, very good for the province of Saskatchewan, and they will have our support as well. By the way, it's why we also support Gateway. It's why we support a west to east pipeline. Ladies and gentlemen, if Canada is an aspirant to being an energy superpower, and it ought to be, but if it's an aspirant to that kind of an objective, then we need to act like it. We need to be willing to move our energy to the coasts and supply the world with that energy. And I believe that we can be an honest broker. We can be a force for good in the coming months and years as we realize the full potential of Canada as an energy power. I even got into kind of an indirect Twitter fight with the actor Martin Sheen about the Keystone Pipeline. It was really surreal for me. He was in Saskatoon at an event, and I actually at that time was in Washington. Actually, we were in Washington with Ambassador Wilkins, who's also our agent in the United States and doing an amazing job of getting us access, both to Democrats and Republicans, and helping us raise the profile of the province in Washington and in the U.S. In fact, on that particular trip, as I recall, we were between meetings heading to see Senator Lindsey Graham, who's a friend of David Wilkins, and we ran into former presidential contender John McCain. It's a true story. And John McCain sort of ran at David, and I was with him, and I was thinking, well, this is going to be good. David reached out his hand and shook it, and John McCain then introduced himself to me, and I told him just a little bit, the elevator pitch about why we were there, and then he proceeded to tell me that David Wilkins was the worst ambassador that the United States had ever sent to Canada because he was from South Carolina, and he was pretty sure we didn't understand a single word he ever said. And that's pretty much actually true, you know. For the first 3 months of hanging out with David, I carried a South Carolina English dictionary, but it's working out better now. But anyway, while we were down in Washington, the media here in Saskatoon asked Martin Sheen this question. They said, you know, our premier's down in Washington advocating for Keystone to the U.S. administration. Do you have a message for him? And Martin Sheen said, yes, I do. And his message, and I'm quoting now, was this. His message to me was, don't do this. Don't do this. It's not something you're going to be proud of in the future. And I thought, you know, Mr. Sheen, I appreciate that, but don't you think Charlie actually could use that advice more than me? The engagement part of our growth plan, by the way, is also why we've worked with our federal government to try to open up market access to China and India's civilian nuclear market. These are the most robust civilian nuclear markets you'll find anywhere in the world, and up until very recently, no Saskatchewan uranium could go into those markets, notwithstanding the fact that Australia had nuclear cooperation agreements there, and we're moving that uranium into those countries. And we had a willing partner in the federal government. I need to tell you this. And you need to thank a member of parliament or someone you know affiliated with the federal government, because to my knowledge, there's not been a prime minister. Maybe it's because we only have 14 seats, I don't know why. But there's not been a prime minister that has taken this issue, uranium from this province, and trying to open up markets around the world to more to heart than the prime minister of the country. And it means a lot to us. $3 billion over the next 10 years as we see these nuclear cooperation agreements conclude to the benefit of Saskatchewan people. I remember when the Prime Minister was heading over to China to take this matter on firsthand, and we were told on the Friday that Saturday the Prime Minister would be calling. I just didn't know what time he'd be calling, and so Tammy and I went to Safeway. We do that often on a Saturday in Swift Current. We thought the timing would work out right, but sure enough, in the produce section, my phone rings, and there's a 613 number, and I'm right in the banana area of the produce section, and it's the switchboard, and the voice comes on the line and says, "This is the Prime Minister's switchboard. Will you hold for the Prime Minister?" Which is always really a rhetorical question, I think. And, well, I was picking out some of these bananas, but I guess I can. So we chatted for a little bit, and it was a very surreal moment. I thanked the Prime Minister for what he had said he was going to be doing when he was in China, and he did those things. And then I caught up with Tammy in Safeway there, and so she said, "So who was on the phone?" And I said, "It was the Prime Minister. He wanted to talk about a nuclear cooperation agreement with the People's Republic of China." And she said, "Who was on the phone?" The fifth component of our growth plan is competitiveness. We've got to make sure that our taxes are competitive. We've got to make sure that our regulatory environment is competitive, that our labor legislative environment is competitive with other jurisdictions. And as we surveyed these things, we noted that notwithstanding this new market access for uranium, our royalty structure was out of whack. We had some of the highest uranium royalties in the world, and so in this budget, with the leadership of Tim McMillan, the minister, we've passed a budget to lower those royalties. We'll make progress in the years ahead as well. We need to be very supportive of this industry, and I want to tell you unequivocally that this party is very supportive of the uranium industry. We have, for example, in Cameco, who are here tonight, we have in Cameco a national champion, a worldwide leader headquartered right in our province. 40 to 45% of the great careers they provide in mining go to First Nations and Métis people in Saskatchewan. We are proud of them, and we're proud of that fact. It might be the best record you'd find in North America. Our opponents, to be honest, are not as comfortable with uranium mining. I'd say half of our opponents are comfortable with uranium mining, and the other half, I don't think they'll even buy a microwave. So the sixth component of our growth plan is fiscal responsibility, and I'll get to that in a moment. So that's the how. How are we going to keep things going? How are we going to stay out of the way of Kip so he can create jobs? These are some of the things that we think will work for us. We've listened to all of you to develop this particular plan. What about the why? Why growth? There are challenges related to growth. Infrastructure challenges, Mayor Fougere is very aware of. Housing challenges. You wait a little longer in traffic. Why is growth important? You know, folks, I think free enterprise-oriented governments or center-right governments or growth-oriented governments, conservative governments, call them what you want, they have a hard time with this issue, of explaining why growth is important, of finishing the sentence correctly. I believe in economic development because, you'll hear them say, well, because the GDP will increase. Wrong. I believe in economic development or economic growth because there'll be more jobs for people. Actually, still wrong. We need to finish the sentence properly so that we never lose focus on the importance of an effective growth agenda. The end of the sentence, by the way, we find across our province every day. We find it in our capital city. We find it in this room. In this room, there's a young man named Connor Stevens. Connor was diagnosed with autism when he was 4. The psychologist who provided the diagnosis talked then about what Connor wouldn't be able to do. Never read, never write, never finish school, never work, never leave home. These days, Connor is focused on what he can do. He's learned to read. Connor is working. Connor enrolled in a work skills development program at a beautiful place called the Autism Resource Center right here in Regina, which just opened. A facility supported by our government. He was working at Safeway as a customer clerk. I think it was part-time. We found out today that Connor was offered, I think today, a full-time job at Sarcan. Connor receives a modest income from something called the Saskatchewan Assured Income for Disabilities Program, SAID. It started in 2009 when the disability community came to the government and said, you know, we're not asking for any more money, but the support we get for the disability community, we'd like it to be characterized as something different than social assistance. Other provinces do it, and it should be more reflective of the unique nature of the needs here, and so we said, okay. Apparently they've been waiting a long time for it. We thought that was a good idea. And then in the 2011 election campaign, we promised to provide more resources to increase the support for those on SAID and increase the number of people eligible for SAID from 3,000 to 10,000. And that work is underway. And in this current budget passed in the legislature, we increased SAID support for individuals by $50 a month and for couples by $60 a month. And so that'll be a benefit as well to people like Connor. We also promised when we took office to increase money for autism funding. We've been able to double that funding in 5 years to $7.5 million, but there's more work to do. But ladies and gentlemen now, remember how we're able to provide any additional resources either to SAID, which will be over $100 million, or to autism resources. It's because of a growing economy. It's because of a broader tax base that you are building. Connor Stevens is the end of the sentence. In this room tonight is Roseanne Desjardins and Gordon Yeshapi. Roseanne and Gord attended the Saskatchewan Indian Institute of Technologies, SIIT. You won't find a better technical institute in the country. Roseanne is a member of the Musqueam First Nation. Last year she enrolled in, this will be close to Tammy's heart. Last year she enrolled in SIIT's Women in Trades program. She's an apprentice scaffolder. She's working towards her ticket. Roseanne is on the job now with steeplejack scaffolding at the Co-op refinery in Regina. Her goal, by the way, is precisely the same as your goal and mine. She wants to create a better life for her 2 girls, for 7-year-old Kylie and 6-year-old Brooke. Gord is from Carry the Kettle First Nation. He became a journeyman electrician about a year ago. He passed the Red Seal exam with 85%. He's working at Alliance Energy here in the capital city. Gord has the same motivation as Roseanne with respect to those 2 little girls, and he has even something more. He would like to inspire young people to follow his example. He said, and I quote, "When I go home, back to carry the kettle, all the kids run up to me and ask me how I became an electrician. I tell them how, and I tell them that they can too." SIIT is an institution that's doing great work in this province, providing education and then connecting graduates with opportunities, with jobs. And ladies and gentlemen, a growing economy, the growth plan, a broader tax base has allowed this government, our government, to increase funding for these kinds of programs to SIIT by 48% in 5 years. Roseanne and Gord are the end of the sentence. Carrie Darren is in this room tonight. Last August, Carrie and her family were on a quad outing at Moose Mountain Provincial Park. They were enjoying sort of the last few days of summer, and they were having a great time until Carrie had an accident. She ran over a poplar tree that had fallen across the trail. The tree impaled Carrie against her seat. She sustained a lacerated liver, damage to her diaphragm, shattered ribs, and she was losing a lot of blood. Carrie was in big, big trouble. Her husband, Brant, raced to find a place where the cell would work, and Carrie was left thinking about her 2 daughters who were with her and how she had to survive for them. Brant made the call, and at the other end was a voice, was a group of people that frankly haven't been in the province very long. STARS ambulance. She was in critical condition when that helicopter arrived from its Regina base. The STARS crew quickly got her aboard. They headed for the Arcola Hospital. They touched down for about 2 minutes, got some blood lifted off, and there was a 40-minute flight to Regina. She received a life-saving blood transfusion en route, and Carrie has fully recovered. And she and Brant are here tonight. Because of STARS, which celebrated its first anniversary in Saskatchewan. And ladies and gentlemen, a growing economy, the economy that all of you are building, helped to expand the tax base so that the government would have $18 million more that we might be able to start STARS in Saskatchewan. Carrie is the end of the sentence. The Plains Surgery and Outpatient Care Center we're building in Regina, that's the end of the sentence. An 83% increase in funding for CBOs that provide supports to adults living with intellectual disabilities in this city. That's the end of the sentence. A 202% boost in funding to CBOs providing support for youth, for children, youth, and families at risk. That's the end of the sentence. More revenue sharing for the city of Regina. That's also the end of the sentence. These are the reasons that we need to be focused on growth. These are the reasons that we need to be concerned about our economy every single day. They're also the reason why we need to be focused on fiscal responsibility. And that probably seems counterintuitive because all of these things sound pretty expensive, I'm sure, to all of you, but they were all done in the context of balanced budgets on the general revenue side, on the summary financial statement side. Ladies and gentlemen, the surest way we can erode our chance to sustain programs like this for the long term is to deficit finance. Year after year after year until they're accumulated and some government down the road has to hack and slash and we're back to ground zero. And fiscal responsibility is that 6th part of our growth plan. Thomas Jefferson said, quote, "To preserve our independence, we must not let our rulers load us with perpetual debt. We must make our election between economy and liberty or profusion and servitude." Maybe in different words, I think this was the message from Saskatchewan people in the 2011 election. I think they chose economy and liberty. I think they said, do these things, make these investments, but let's make sure we pay as we go. Let's make sure that the budget is balanced. And that's why we've taken our cue from the people of this province. We've paid off $3 billion in general debt. It's why we're shrinking government by 15% in terms of our FTEs. It's why we're asking our funding partners in the health regions and school boards and municipalities at our universities to watch the budget to make sure we can sustain this for the long term. I don't know how long you will give us to serve in government. I don't know how long the people of this province will give the Saskatchewan Party the great honor to be in a position of leadership. Governments make mistakes. They accumulate over time. We get on your nerves. I don't know how long it is until you're tired of Kevin Doherty or Mark Doherty, or trying to remember the pronunciation of the two. I don't know how long you're going to give us, but this I know. As long as you will give us, as much time as you will give our party to be in a position of leadership, we will never, ever forget the importance of growth and the fundamental aspects of a growth plan about competitive taxes and the right regulations and investment in infrastructure. And more importantly, we will never forget the reasons why we want growth in Saskatchewan to continue for the long term. The reasons are Connor and Roseanne and Gord and Carrie. They're not just the end of the sentence. They're the genesis about the great work that we're all about in Saskatchewan, to keep building this most special of places. May God bless that place and its people. May He bless Saskatchewan. Thanks for coming.